I'm Nick Coman with Dragonfly Creative. Today we're going to talk about differential feed on the Serger. When we're talking about differential feed, we're talking about a specific sewing machine, and that's the Serger. So a Serger is a machine that finishes the edge and sews a seam at the same time. What makes it slightly different is the fact that it has what's called differential feed. So if you look at the two feed teeth right here, normally feed teeth on a sewing machine are hooked together. These feed teeth have a space in the middle, and what differential feed does is allows the feed teeth to move at separate rates of speed. So you can make it so that this one is moving faster than this one, or this one is moving slower than this one. So this is going and this is just moving slow. What that does is when it's moving faster, this is feeding fabric from the back faster, and when it's moving slower, what it's doing is it's pushing the fabric together and causing it to ruffle or pucker. In the middle is normal, and it just feeds the fabric at a regular rate. Now, a lot of sergers today have gotten a lot better at sort of adjusting the differential by themselves. But some of the older sergers, like this is my first serger, this one I have to adjust by myself. So if I'm sewing something like a knit, I need to make that differential feed less because the knit tends to do the waving thing. It stretches out as it's being sewn. If I'm sewing something like a lightweight chiffon, I have to go ahead and I have to make the differential feed a little wider, and it needs to stretch it, okay? Instead of push it together, it needs to stretch it because this will pucker. And then I'm going to show you how to use it on regular fabric to actually sew one piece to another and have one be ruffled and one be straight. So let's start with just a regular piece of fabric and look at what a serged edge is supposed to look like. So we're going to start with just a regular piece of cotton, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half. We don't need to use the entire length of it. And I'm going to put this underneath the presser foot. Now I have this on what is listed on the machine as a normal stitch length and a normal stitch width, which is about 3 millimeters. And the differential feed, the knob which is over on this side, is set at normal. Okay, so everything is set at normal and it should just stitch. So I'm just stitching this. I'm trimming off just the sort of fuzzy edge of the fabric. And you can see right there that this fabric is nice and flat. If you actually were to give that a press, it does look a little bit bunched up, but it's not really, because all it will take is a quick press and it lays flat again. Any bunching that happens is because of the feed teeth marking the fabric. So that's what a regular serge seam will look like, or a serged edge. That can be used to finish garments, or if you're actually sewing a seam, it will sew the seam. So now that's what it's supposed to look like. Let's go ahead and stitch this at a normal stitch width and a normal stitch length on my knit. Now this is a rather heavyweight cotton knit, and I'm going to go ahead and just stitch this at a regular stitch length, regular stitch width, and just go ahead and let it feed as it will normally. And you can see that that's coming out a little wavy, okay? It's just feeding by itself. I'm not doing anything to it on this end. Now, if we lay that down, see, you've sort of got these curves, these curls and waves, and that's because as the fabric went through the serger, it caused it to stretch a little bit, and so I'm getting this little bit of a ruffling on the edge, okay? To fix that, I'm going to switch the differential feed. I'm going to turn it a little bit towards the positive. So if you start with differential feed on what you think of as 0, you can either switch it to the negative or you can switch it to the positive. So I'm going to switch this to the positive so that it pushes this together a little bit and causes it not to ruffle. So we're going to try it with just going to 0.5. And just by changing that little bit, you can already see that it's not waving. Actually, it just sort of puckered a little bit. But let's give that a press and see what it actually does. Because when it tends to pucker just a teeny bit, I find that a lot of that is just simply because of the feed teeth, and those puckers come out when it's pressed. There we go. So that's so just by increasing the pressure or the differential feed just a little bit, you can go ahead and that helps take that ruffling out and just make the seam nice. Okay? Now, if we're talking about a real thin fabric, I'm going to switch the differential feed back to normal, and now the stitch length and stitch width is just about the same. It's on normal width, normal length, and I'm going to run this through here about halfway, and you'll be able to see that it puckers up. Okay? Whoop. Yeah, already we're getting some pretty good puckering. Okay, so see, that's actually puckering quite substantially. Now this is on a regular differential feed and a normal stitch length and stitch width. So I'm going to change the differential feed now to a negative, okay? So I switched it all the way to the negative, and now let's see what it does. This is still the regular stitch length and stitch width, okay? And it's better, not perfect, but it's better. So the difference between the two differential feeds is actually fairly substantial. This one is still puckered a little, but it's not near as puckered as this one is. So if it's still puckering, how do you fix that? Okay? Let me show you a couple of different ways. First of all, you can sew under tension, okay? So if you actually, I'm gonna just stretch this out, and it's basically breaking the serger threads, and we'll just cut those off. But if I am to pull this edge, let me get it started here, and if I actually go ahead and cut that edge off, and I'm holding behind and I'm holding in front, and I'm just applying tension. I'm letting the machine feed the fabric the way it will. So it's doing all the feeding. And yeah, this is a little more work, but it's getting you the results that you want. Okay, so that's one way to do that, and that is just putting the fabric under tension while you're sewing it. The other way to do it is I can open up my side here, and then I can decrease my stitch length. So my stitch length is on normal, or 3. And now what I've done is I put it down to 2, so that means that it's taking a smaller bite when I'm sewing, okay? And it gives me a denser stitch. You can see that. It gives me a denser stitch along the edge, but it's also laying much flatter, and that's because the stitches are closer together, so it's not having to go as far in between stitches. So, depending on what it is that you're looking for, this particular method, the holding the fabric taut, is going to give you wider stitch length but a very smooth edge. And if you wanted to just, if the denser stitch width is okay, then all you have to do is change the stitch length, and that the stitches will be closer together and you get the same result. It just depends on the finish that you want. If this is too much thread around the edge, then do it this way. If this is okay, then go ahead and do it this way. Now, I'm going to show you how to ruffle 2 pieces of fabric together at the same time. So to ruffle 2 pieces of fabric together with the serger, you're going to go ahead and take your 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to ruffle the smaller one, and this is going to be the fabric that is going to stay straight. So one of the things that you got to realize is it's going to be a different sort of ratio on every type of fabric, depending on how slippery it is, how lightweight it is, how much the fabric moves, whether you're doing it on the cross grain or the straight grain. But if you do samples, you can measure it out and get a really good estimate of how much yardage you're going to need to finish a set of ruffles. Like if you wanted to do a set of ruffles on a curtain, on a bed, bed linens, anything like that, or even clothing. You just need to sample it out first and then do that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this under the presser foot, and the 2 pieces are together and the edges are even. I, however, am going to hold the top one, actually after I get it started with the needle. So let me get it under the needle. Okay, so there it's under the needle. I am going to hold the top one and I'm just going to guide the bottom one. And now I have the differential feed turned all the way up. I'm going to turn this back to regular stitch, a normal stitch length, because that's going to give me a better ruffle. So I'm getting a little bit of ruffling here. One of the things that I can do now is make the stitch length longer. And then on this one, I've gotten a good bit of ruffle. Okay? Now this is one way to do this while this is on the machine, okay? And that's giving me a nice little bit of ruffle. If I were to turn this over and show you the seam, as it were, if we press that, you've got a nice little ruffle there, okay? So that's just a nice mild ruffle. If you want more of a ruffle, what you're going to need to do is take the original ruffle fabric, go ahead and do the differential on it, and then what I would do is I would go ahead and go back, attach this to the original. I'm going to once again keep the ruffled edge down, and then I'm going to serge the two pieces together. I could sew them, but by serging, this is going to give me even more ruffle. And if I hold the piece on top flat, it's not going to ruffle that particular piece, and it will give me even a little more ruffle on the bottom. Okay, so that is a much bigger ruffle, a much deeper ruffle, but that is sort of a two-step process. But once again, this is infinitely easier than having to sew all those pieces of fabric by machine and then pull them up into different little ruffles and make sure that they're even. This makes sure that those ruffles are even right from the very beginning. So this has been Differential Feed with Nick Coman at Dragonfly Creative. Thanks so much for watching.